Hi and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave and this is episode 879B, and today's date is January 28th, 2016, and the title of the episode is Special Forces Operating in Libya Are Preparing for a Ground Invasion. Now, before I get started, I just have an announcement to make. The interview with G. Edward Griffin and Petrea Patrick has now been uploaded to the X22 Report Spotlight YouTube channel. So you can go right over to YouTube, you can view the video there, or you can come over to the x22report.com site, scroll down a little bit, look over to your right-hand side, you'll see the video there. Or you can go to newssentinel.com, you can scroll down, look over to your right, you'll see the video on that site. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, yesterday, Lavoie was shot and killed, and it's starting to seem that there was some type of plant within their organization. And then we're getting information that their credit cards were being tracked by the FBI, so they were looking at purchases and they knew, where they got gas, where they were going. And it seems like this whole incident was a complete setup, and there are now 6 to 7 witnesses saying that Lavoie had his hands up, he was on his knees, he never fired. Actually, none of the group with Bundy fired a weapon, and it looks like the FBI, the police, they decided to fire, and they killed Lavoie. And we're seeing right now that Bundy is out there through his lawyer saying, everyone needs to stand down right now, and he's doing this through his attorney, Mike Arnold. And he's telling everyone to stand down. The fight now is in the courtroom. And we're seeing that there are still people in the Oregon area, in the refuge center, and they are still sticking it out. And they have not left. But we can see that many of them have been arrested right now. And it seems like this was a complete setup. They tracked them. They knew exactly where they were going to be. And basically, it was an operation that they put into motion. What's very interesting, what's happening in Oregon right now, is that the FBI has asked the media to leave the area. Doesn't mean they're going to, but that tells us that something's going on. And then we also get information that there is a no-fly zone which was established over this entire area for law enforcement activities. It was issued at 10:17 p.m. And this was on January 27th, and this is going to go until February 10th. And basically it says it was put into place to provide a safe environment for law enforcement activities. So this kind of says that something is about to happen if the people don't leave the area. And this could be another Waco. It could be an all-out battle. And I think this is what they're pushing for, because as we know, the government, they only use force. They don't want to have negotiations. They always think they're in the right. And this is a complete violation of the Constitution. And what we're seeing right now is something that they want to push forward to try to get this gigantic armed conflict battle. And they're trying to push this as hard as they can, and they want these people to shoot back. They want this. And this will allow more federal agents to come, more shooting, more deaths, and they're hoping that this causes more of this around the country, which then they can declare martial law. You can see what they're trying to do. And Bundy and his crew, they were being very peaceful. They had certain demands. They just wanted the FBI to say, hey, yes, we will look into what the BLM is doing. But the FBI said, no, we're not going to do this. And they just wanted to be heard. They just wanted people to look and say, okay, look, the BLM is taking away land from the ranchers, and they're doing it any way they possibly can. And at this point, this is happening all across the country, where the federal government believes that it has power and control over the people. And eventually what's going to happen is they're going to come down harder and harder on the people as time goes on. And we know the government always lies. I mean, they never tell the truth. And they continually lie to the people. For instance, we know the FBI continually says ISIS has encryption apps. They're using encryption. Everyone has to allow the FBI full access into everything that they do. And then we come to find out, and this was an investigation by Daily Dot, and they've done an investigation about this ISIS encrypted messaging app, where they say they have it and we just can't break into it. This is why we can't have encryption. So we saw this reported in Fortune, Newsweek, Times of India, TechCrunch, and it was continually reprinted. It came from Defense One, and it reported that the Islamic State built this new Android app called Al-Rawi, and this was for exchanging encrypted messages. So Daily Dot said, okay, where can we find this app? Well, no one can point to this app. And the Western experts wondered why they couldn't find this app. Where was it? No one knew. I mean, they showed screenshots of it, but when you look closely at it, it's like a glorified RSS reader with a totally different name. The Defense One journalist who first reported on this claims that the app is out there and he'll try to find it. They found a version of the Al-Rawi app, but when they looked into it, guess what? It had no capability of using encryption. Actually, when they looked even closer at the app, it was built by an MIT app inventor, a plug-and-play tool meant primarily for children. I mean, so they went back and said, okay, this app is not what you're saying. There's no encryption whatsoever. And they're saying, oh, well, maybe that's the wrong app. We'll try to find a different app which is the right one. And guess what? It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. This was all propaganda once again. The whole thing was fake, phony, and false. The FBI used it to push encryption, to tell everyone to keep you safe. We need access to all of your information because ISIS is using encrypted apps and we can't break into them. Well, that doesn't exist. And guess what? The whole thing, once again, was propaganda. Now, the Pentagon, because of a court order, has to publish 198 photos of tortured detainees in the U.S. prison in Iraq and Afghanistan. Remember, no due process. They bring them in there, and yes, America does torture people. The American Civil Rights Group said that they wanted to see these pictures, and the judge says, after a decade-long lawsuit, yes, these pictures need to be shown. Jamil Jaffer, director of the ACLU Center for Democracy, he announced on Wednesday that the U.S. Department of Defense would provide public access to these images. I mean, 10 years went by. Now, Obama promised that he was going to release these images back in 2009. He then turned around and urged Congress to pass a special exemption clause to block the release of the photos, citing security reasons. Well, we know it wasn't security reasons whatsoever. I mean, that's just ridiculous. So, the 198 images out of 2,100 will be released on Friday. The major part of the evidence, approximately 1,900 photos, will remain concealed after Ashton Carter stepped in and he invoked his authority under the 2009 exemption provision last November. It's amazing. Basically, we are torturing people. These are gulags outside of the United States. And I remember when President Obama was initially campaigning, where he was screaming on the top of his lungs that America does not torture people. Well, we do. Not we the people, our government, our agencies. And that doesn't sit right with me, and it shouldn't sit right with anyone. It's proven that torture does not work. And we should be above this. We should be better than this, than to stoop to this low level of torturing people, especially when we know most of these things going on, all these terrorist activities, is being run by the CIA. Now, the propaganda on North Korea is just flying all over the place. We're now getting information that North Korea is preparing to launch a long-range missile as soon as next week. Now, the news agency cited Japanese government officials who said they have analysis of satellite imagery, and it revealed possible signs of preparation for a missile launch. So they don't know what the missile is. They don't even know if there really is a missile. They don't know if this is a space launch. But everyone's going with a long-range missile. Again, using propaganda. Why are they using propaganda? Because they need to provoke North Korea. They need to bring in more military assets. They need to increase military budgets. Why? To prepare for war. South Korea right now is building the propaganda, and they suspect North Korea right now is attempting a cyber attack against targets in the south. So they've heightened military and cyber alert since January 6th. We see the U.S. Senate, the Foreign Relations Committee, they approved sanctions against North Korea. Now the bill is going to go to the U.S. Senate, and then it has to be signed by the president, and they're saying this is going to happen in the next 2 weeks, and most likely it will pass, and there will be sanctions on North Korea. Provoking. Each step is a poke to the country. When you poke a country enough, eventually what happens is they'll lash out. And I made the example many times before where two students are walking down the hallway. There's a bully who pokes this kid. He walks by, day 1. Walks by again. Day 2, he gets poked again by the bully. Day 3, day 4, 3 weeks, 6 weeks. The 7th week, as they're walking down the hall, the kid knows that he's going to be poked, so he lashes out and jumps on the kid and starts beating him up. All the teachers see is that kid jumping on the bully and hitting him out of nowhere. And they send that kid to the principal, and they want him to explain why he all of a sudden, out of nowhere, lashed out and started beating up this kid for no good reason. Because they didn't see the provoking, the poking every single day. This is what we're doing here. We're documenting. We're looking at the poke, to show this is why the country did something, or the U.S. made it look like they did something. This is what we're tracking right now. We see out in Japan, where they're having the protests, and the governor in Okinawa is filing lawsuits because they don't want the U.S. to bring in military assets. Well, they don't care about that. The Pentagon right now, because of what North Korea is doing, because of their hydrogen bomb test, which didn't really happen, because of their long-range missile, which is not happening, they're going to bring in 12 brand new F-16 fighter jets and 14 F-22 stealth bombers to the Okinawa base. Like we said in the past, they created this base to bring in more advanced weapons for the war. They are positioning everything. Now, out in Ukraine, we know that Victoria Nuland, who basically orchestrated the coup d'etat in Ukraine, she was caught on tape. Do they say tape anymore? She was caught on a recording explaining how this whole thing was going to go down. And now she wants to get involved in the Normandy 4 talks. And now the U.S. ambassador to Russia, John Teft, is trying to explain why they want to be included, or they want to know about the Normandy 4 talks. And he's trying to say, well, we're not trying to change the format, which means they are. He says we're focused on trying to help the Normandy group, which they're not. We're not trying to displace them. They are. Because what they want is they want these talks gone, so they can push an offensive. They're meddling and preparing to disrupt all of this. Ukraine's Donetsk Republic is accusing Kiev right now of planning provocations against the OSCE. We've seen them do this before, where they started to fire at the OSCE, snipers from Kiev. And this is all in preparation for what is coming. They don't move very quickly when they plan. They need to make sure that everything is covered. Now, their plans don't always work out, but they make sure people are trained. They make sure that everything is in order. Military assets are there. And they make it look like it just came out of nowhere. But we're tracking everything here. We see out in Saudi Arabia, the U.S. plans to replenish the Saudi missiles. They made the $1.29 billion sale back in November. And they're going to replenish their bombs, their missiles, and everything so they can continue bombing the civilians of Yemen. That's really what it's about. They want the puppet government back in. They want the people to pay, and they want the people to say, I give. Please, yes, we will take the puppet government. NATO, very interestingly, out in Iraq, is going to be training Iraqi military and police forces, but they're not going to be training them in Iraq. They're going to be training them in Jordan, which tells me this is a cover story. They're not really training the Iraqi military and the police forces. They're training other paid mercenaries for Syria, for Iraq, for Libya. These are terrorists. This is what they're training. Because what would be the reason to train them outside of Iraq? It makes no sense at this point. Right now, the U.S. has requested that NATO provide AWAC surveillance planes to help in the area of Syria, Iraq, and Libya. And we know they're planning for these major offensives coming soon. We already know that France has done reconnaissance flights over Libya. Right now, the Pentagon Press Secretary Peter Cook confirmed to reporters there's a small presence of U.S. ground troops in Libya. What are they doing there? Well, they are contacting various militias and other factions to better get a sense of who the players are and who they can use for this next ground invasion. Because there's already reports out there, they are preparing for this next ground invasion. Everything has been set up. It's not coming out of the blue and they're just there. Everything has been in motion. They've been planning this for quite a while. They want the unity government, and they're getting ready. They're going to get ready in Libya, Iraq, and Syria. Because we know the Syrian peace talks, which are supposed to happen tomorrow, might not happen. Right now, we really don't know what the groups are that are attending. That's very unclear. The U.S. wants the terrorist group to attend, and the terrorist group leader is Jaish al-Islam, Army of the Islam, which is basically ISIS, or the equivalent of. And we see that this leader, Zoran al-Lush, saying that, we will attend, but he is committed to Syria's destruction, mass slaughter, and he rejects democracy. He rejects international law. He wants martial law. And we can see right now these talks, I know Russia's trying very hard to put these together with no preconditions, but it seems at this point it's not really working out. And on Wednesday, the State Department spokesman, Mark Toner, lied when he said, "We believe opposition elements should seize this opportunity to test the regime's willingness and intentions and expose before the entire world which parties are serious about a potential peaceful political transition in Syria and which are not." He failed to explain Washington intends endless war, attempting to oust Assad militarily. I mean, right now, the U.S. covertly is planning another event in Syria, Iraq, and Libya. Already, the Syrian opposition says they're not going to attend the peace talks in Geneva on Friday. So these talks are on very shaky grounds right now. We'll have to see tomorrow if they actually go forward. And if they do, we have to see what's on the agenda, and we have to see if the U.S. is still pushing Assad must step down. Assad must step down. Now, out in Paris, a Paris airport worker found a fake bomb, found in a U.S. embassy parcel. This was at the Charles de Gaulle airport in Paris. And the U.S. came out saying, well, this package was in transit from the U.S. to Tunisia, and it was part of a drill. And was it really part of a drill? Why would they send the FedEx package all throughout the world to reach Tunisia when you can deliver it militarily right to FedEx and say, okay, here we go, we're just going to place it into where the drill is going to be held. No one would be the wiser. They could put a tracking number on it. Instead, they're having it go through all these airports and go through all these different hubs. And the package was a pressure cooker with nuts and bolts and was discovered by one of the FedEx employees. And no one was aware of this cargo. Now, it's very interesting they're using a pressure cooker with nuts and bolts. Didn't we see this in Boston bombing? It must be the same agency that did that false flag, where it looks like out in Tunisia, this is where the unity government is. It's on the border of Libya. I wonder if they were planning some type of bombing inside or around that area to make it look like the Islamic State is attacking. Because everything right now does not fit. It seems like they got caught. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.